Okay, let's unpack this. We are undertaking a necessary but extremely difficult deep dive today. We're centering on a dark, a largely buried chapter of the Vietnam War, a story that, due to years of, well, intentional concealment, remained hidden from the public for decades.
It is essential context for understanding not just the conflict, but the catastrophic failure of the military justice system to hold itself accountable.
Yeah.
This deep dive focuses exclusively on the findings laid out in the Pulitzer Prize winning investigative work by Michael Sallah and Mitch Weiss.
That's right. The book we've summarized for you is the culmination of years of meticulous reporting. It's a remarkable piece of journalism.
It really is.
It blends detailed military history with this intensive review of investigative records. Specifically, the long-sealed files of the U.S. Army Criminal Investigation Division.
And on top of that, firsthand accounts from surviving American soldiers and, very importantly, Vietnamese civilians. Our subject is the Tiger Force platoon. This was an elite, highly autonomous reconnaissance and commando unit, part of the 101st Airborne Division.
Right.
The core of this investigation chronicles a systematic series of atrocities committed by certain members of this platoon over a grueling 7-month period in 1967.
And this all occurred primarily in the Central Highlands of Vietnam, so we're talking about areas like the Song Be Valley and Quang Tinh Province. Our mission today is, well, it's straightforward: to provide a clear, factual, and summary-only account of these documented findings.
Yeah, we're presenting the narrative precisely as it's found in the book, maintaining a restrained, respectful, and fact-based delivery.
Which is really appropriate for the gravity of the material we're discussing.
Yeah.
We want you to be well informed about this hidden historical record without having to immerse yourself in the full, intense text.
So let's begin where the book does, at the creation of this unit.
Yeah, we need to understand who the Tiger Force was and why they were so highly regarded at first.
To understand the subsequent collapse, you really have to understand the unit's elite origins. Tiger Force, or TF, was the 101st Airborne's attempt to create their own version of the Army's Special Forces. It was conceived back in 1965 by Colonel David Hackworth.
And he was looking for something specific, right? Not just another line company.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
He wanted an extremely agile, aggressive, and highly lethal unit that could operate without all the bureaucratic restraints of a standard company.
And their composition was unique almost by necessity, given that vision.
Right. They weren't just pulled from a single infantry regiment.
How did they build it?
It was a composite unit. It specifically pulled personnel from the reconnaissance, anti-tank, and even the mortar platoons.
Wow, so a real mix of skill sets.
Exactly. Hackworth was aiming for a force of about 45 men. He infamously said he wanted 40 swinging dicks, and it was designed to be the badass of the badass.
So capable of deep jungle penetration, aggressive, sustained enemy engagement.
That was the idea. And the autonomy was the key. Well, unlike regular line companies that had to constantly radio for clearance and follow these really strict procedures, the Tigers broke into small teams. They operated deep in the jungle.
And they were just let loose.
They were essentially told to do whatever the hell you want to do.
Which minimized bureaucracy, I guess, but it also sounds like it created a distinct lack of oversight from the very beginning.
That's the thing. It's a double-edged sword. It fostered the elite reputation, at least initially, but the seeds of the problem were right there in the design.
And the screening process for these 45 men, the recruitment, that was also specifically designed to select a certain personality type.
Right.
It went beyond just basic combat experience.
That's where the book highlights a critical detail. Yeah, they required at least 3 months of combat experience, but the key component was the psychological screening.
And what were they looking for?
It centered explicitly on the soldier's willingness to kill. They weren't looking for hesitation. They were looking for, well, an enthusiasm for combat.
The book uses the example of a soldier named Sam Ybarra to really illustrate this specific psychological profile.
Right. Ybarra was half Apache and half Mexican, and he deeply exemplified the aggressiveness they wanted.
He was pretty open about it.
Oh, yeah. He was noted for stating, with this unsettling coldness, that he could kill without hesitation, whether it was with a knife, an M16, or his bare hands.
So for him, Tiger Force was a perfect fit.
He hated the typical regimented army structure, and Tiger Force offered him an outlet for that violence and that autonomy. The sources say he was thrilled to join. He felt he finally belonged somewhere that embraced his willingness to kill.
And that's a crucial detail. because the unit was designed to select for lethal aggression.
Which meant when controls break down later, that aggression had nowhere to go but toward the enemy, or, as it turned out, civilians.
So let's place them historically. It's 1967. They're deployed to a really complex and strategically critical area, the Central Highlands.
Quang Ngai Province, specifically, and it was vital, a very productive rice-growing valley.
But a tough nut to crack for the U.S. forces.
Incredibly difficult. The Viet Cong, the VC, were gaining significant local support there. And this was partly because of the failure of American operations that were supposed to be about pacification.
The book mentions Operation Rawhide.
Yeah, Operation Rawhide was this forced relocation effort. The Army tried to herd over 800 cattle and thousands of residents out of the Songvi Valley.
Forced relocation. I mean, that rarely works, especially when people have deep cultural and ancestral ties to the land.
Exactly. And the result was that many civilians who were forced out of the valley later just escaped the relocation camps and returned home. They wanted to farm their land.
So this mass return of the local population into what was designated free fire zone, that's the setup.
That sets the stage for the dramatic and disastrous shift in the unit's mission. The elite Tigers were about to be turned into forced security enforcers.
Which brings us to the unit's tragic inflection point. This is the descent into violence.
Right. The operational shifts, combined with severe leadership strain, caused a complete breakdown of discipline and morale.
So the unit's high-stakes role as elite recon is suddenly replaced by what the soldiers themselves viewed as frustrating, meaningless shit work.
Yeah, forced internal security. Their task was now to clear the Songvi Valley and physically prevent those displaced villagers from returning to their homes.
And this is where the rules start to dissolve.
Completely. The Tigers were tasked with escorting people to landing zones, but they quickly abandoned the established protocol. They often refused to bring translators.
Because they just saw it as a distraction.
The frustration was mounting. They viewed this as interfering with combat operations, not being a combat operation.
And the orders they were given became pretty chilling.
Chillingly clear. If people insisted on staying, they would be removed by force, and the villages would be burned to the ground.
The logic cited was brutal efficiency. If you burn the infrastructure...
People can't live there. Precisely. The stated logic was, if you torched the huts, the people couldn't come back.
So that shift effectively blurred the line between combatants and non-combatants.
It turned the local populace, who were just trying to survive and farm their land, into targets obstructing the mission.
And all of this was happening against a backdrop of severe physical and psychological degradation among the men. The sources paint a picture of just total burnout.
I mean, the human body can only take so much. And by July of '67, the unit was severely burned out.
What were the conditions like?
They were dealing with relentless heat, constant fear of booby traps, which are just indiscriminate and incredibly demoralizing leeches, and debilitating conditions like jungle rot.
And on top of that, drug use was a factor.
A huge factor. The unit was heavily reliant on drugs. We're talking painkillers like Darvon and amphetamines, just to maintain function and stay awake on patrol.
The description of one soldier, Douglas Teeters, really stands out as an example of this.
It does. Teeters was described as being emaciated and strung out on drugs by the time he left.
So their physical and mental state was just volatile.
And unstable. It makes calculated decision-making, especially in high-stress situations, almost impossible.
This kind of intense, unstable environment demanded strong moral leadership.
It did.
But the book documents a clear leadership vacuum at the platoon level right when it was needed most.
The command structure faltered dramatically. A Lieutenant James Hawkins took command in July 1967, and he quickly proved to be incompetent and erratic.
What kind of incidents are we talking about?
Witnesses recalled multiple things. Drinking heavily before night maneuvers, nearly calling in airstrikes on the wrong coordinates, which would have killed his own men.
Wow.
His incompetence was a catalyst for chaos. When the leader lacks judgment and stability, the men operating under that much stress, they lose their moral compass completely.
And this vacuum meant the platoon fractured internally.
Yeah, you saw clear division. On one side, you had soldiers like Sammy Barra and William Doyle who fully embraced the dissent. They adopted the shoot anything that moves mentality.
But on the other side,
you had men like Donald Wood and Manuel Sanchez, who were desperately trying to adhere to regulations and stop the escalating violence. And that led to deep internal conflict and resentment.
Sanchez even wrote home about it.
He did. He wrote that he was already troubled, stating, we never did things like that, which just reflects the rapid moral decay he was witnessing.
And it's fascinating that the pressure wasn't just coming from inside the unit. It was being driven from the very top of the battalion command.
Absolutely. The fixation on the body count metric.
That pressure came directly from the battalion commander, Lieutenant Colonel Gerald Morse. His call sign was Ghostwriter.
And he placed immense, unrelenting pressure on his units to produce results. And results in this context meant one thing: bodies.
And this pressure eventually coalesced into a very specific, bizarre, and terrifying order.
Yes. Later testimony confirmed an order transmitted over the radio demanding that the battalion achieve a count of 327 kills.
And the number. That's the key part.
The context is critical. 327 matched the unit's designation, the 327th Infantry.
So using a unit number as a kill quota.
The sheer absurdity of it is a profound indictment of the command culture. This message, which was confirmed by multiple soldiers like William Carpenter and Clint, it just reinforced the perception that the primary objective was body count over all other regulations.
It was essentially command-level license to fuel indiscriminate killing.
Which brings us to the most difficult part of this narrative: the documented events that constitute war crimes.
The investigative reports show this systematic erosion of the rules of engagement.
The sources make it clear that the men received minimal, almost non-existent instruction on the Geneva Conventions, which clearly defined 18 categories of war crimes.
So with that, plus the frustration of clearing the valley, plus the pressure from Ghostwriter,
the mindset within Tiger Force solidified. Every Vietnamese person, particularly in the Song Vi Valley, was viewed as a potential VC and therefore an enemy to be eliminated.
Let's focus on the systematic targeting of unarmed civilians in the Song Vi Valley. We have to start with the deeply disturbing practice of mutilation that the book explicitly states was normalized within Tiger Force.
Yeah, this is hard to talk about. The book documents that collecting human ears was not an isolated incident. It was an accepted practice, a kind of rite of passage within Tiger Force.
And Sam Ibarra, again, is cited as a prime example of this.
He is, killing a young Vietnamese teenager with a knife and severing his ears.
And the investigative notes even detail how they were preserved.
Yes. Soldiers would often carry these ears in necklaces or preserve them in small ration bags filled with vinegar.
As trophies.
Trophy-taking, and also a chilling display of fearlessness and total disregard for life. Another soldier, Michael Sallah, gave sworn testimony about it.
What did he see?
He detailed seeing Ibarra cutting off an ear with a straight-line razor, his hands covered in blood, and later seeing Ibarra with a jar containing several ears and a bag with 15 to 20 gold teeth.
Extracted from the dead.
Believed to be, yes. This level of depravity just shows how far removed the unit was from basic military conduct.
Beyond the mutilation, there are multiple documented accounts of the deliberate execution of elderly and unarmed individuals.
And often carried out by leaders in the unit.
Which points directly to the failure of leadership to set any kind of moral boundary.
Exactly. Sergeant Harold Trout, a veteran who should have been a stabilizing force, executed a wounded Vietnamese man with a .45 pistol.
And he claimed it was a mercy killing.
He did. But the act of executing a non-combative wounded person is an unequivocal violation of military law and the Geneva Conventions.
And Lieutenant Hawkins, the platoon leader, he wasn't just tolerating this, he was actively participating.
That's correct, and this is confirmed by multiple witnesses, Heaney, Carpenter, and Lee. They testified that Hawkins shot an unarmed old man named Dow Hugh.
What was the man doing?
He was simply carrying a pole and 2 baskets. He was detained, he was terrified, he was screaming, and when soldiers like Leo Heaney tried to object,
Hawkins shut them down.
Dismissed them with contempt. If I want your opinion, I'll ask for it. It established a clear dynamic. Resistance would be silenced, and unlawful violence would be tolerated, even encouraged, by command.
And the targeting extended to women as well.
Mm-hmm.
Donald Wood, the resisting soldier we mentioned earlier, he tried to intervene in one instance involving elderly women.
He did. Wood reported that he actively attempted to counter Hawkins's order to fire on 2 elderly women who were approaching their perimeter.
They were probably just trying to get back to their village.
Most likely. But despite Wood's clear warning, Hawkins opened fire himself, followed by other guards, wounding one of the women. The deliberate firing on non-threatening civilians was becoming the norm, not the exception.
One of the most damning pieces of evidence for the later CID investigation was the confession of Sergeant James Barnett.
Regarding the murder of a young mother.
We have to handle this with the utmost restraint.
Barnett's confession years later was heartbreakingly detailed. He admitted that Sergeant Trout ordered him to grease a young mother after her husband escaped into the brush.
And he did it.
Barnett shot her in the chest from a close range, about 10 to 15 feet away.
The investigative files contain more detail, don't they?
They do. Barnett's testimony also said that the woman had been given a sedative, likely Darvon, by a medic, which made her palmed down and high just before the execution.
And he also insinuated something else.
He insinuated that Trout had sex with her in a bunker beforehand.
It's just horrific.
Burnett confessed that while he was desensitized to killing, this specific order made him cringe, but he carried it out because of the coercive environment.
So the systemic breakdown also meant that procedures for handling captured individuals were just abandoned entirely.
Prisoners were rarely, if ever, transported to the rear as required. They were routinely executed.
The book mentions Manuel Sanchez again here.
Yes. Sanchez was shocked when 2 prisoners he was guarding were shot from 5 feet away by other Tigers who explicitly said they were acting under Hawkins' orders. Killing prisoners was common policy.
And the standard operating procedure for clearing bunkers was also violated, which led to mass casualties of non-combatants.
The soldiers routinely tossed grenades into bunkers without checking for civilians or using interpreters to issue warnings, which is standard procedure,
resulting in the deaths of women and children.
Numerous. A former Tiger, Charles Fulton, admitted to tossing grenades into a bunker and then hearing the cries of people underground.
Did they do anything?
He noted that no one bothered to check or help them, and crucially, no weapons were found in the bunker afterward, confirming the victims were civilians.
The book documents that after the Tigers took heavy casualties and shifted to Quang Tin province, the unit's rage, it intensified.
It did. And this leads to an incident described as one of the most vicious acts documented.
This occurred during a village sweep in Quang Tin.
Sammy Barra beheaded a baby. This horrific event was witnessed by the medic, Harold Fisher, and another soldier, Terrence Kerrigan.
Kerrigan was the one who recounted it.
Yes. Profoundly upset, he recounted it to Fisher. Ybarra was later seen wearing a Buddha bracelet taken from the child.
And Fisher's testimony.
Fisher, probably out of fear of Ybarra, denied seeing the specific act of beheading, but he confirmed he saw the baby's headless body immediately after brushing past Ybarra, leaving the hut.
The corroboration of such an extreme act just highlights the total moral abandonment of the unit at this point.
It's staggering. And all through this period of indiscriminate killing, High Command was pushing the body count agenda that provided the justification for it.
The radio order from Ghostwriter El Teco, Morse demanding the 327 kills.
That was the explicit permission structure. It took this unit, which was already selected for its lethality and operating autonomously, and it directed that aggression indiscriminately. It solidified the notion among the men that the goal was numerical, not strategic, and it validated the kill everything that moves policy.
Which led to the internal collapse of the unit, the profound moral fracture.
Exactly. The men who witnessed or participated in these atrocities were broken, both those who succumbed and those who resisted.
Even in this toxic, coercive environment, there was internal resistance. A significant moral counter-narrative was happening among soldiers who knew what they were doing was wrong.
And their efforts to resist were systematically ignored or punished. It demonstrates a failure of accountability that started right there in the field.
We mentioned Manuel Sanchez writing home about his second thoughts.
Deeply troubled by the killing of unarmed Vietnamese.
But Donald Woods stands out as the primary resistor who really tried to escalate his concerns up the chain of command.
Wood was relentless. He tried repeatedly to stop Hawkins' reckless actions in the field, warning him against firing on civilians.
And then he went to Lieutenant Naughton.
He complained to Naughton, warning that Hawkins was not only incompetent, he specifically cited that Hawkins couldn't read maps, but that his behavior was going to get men killed.
And he also warned about the moral contagion.
He did. He said the younger guys are impressionable. They're going to eventually go along, and when that happens, the Tigers will be nothing but an assassination squad.
And Wood didn't stop in Vietnam.
No. When he got back to the U.S., Wood took the incredible risk of going directly to the Inspector General's office at Fort Bragg to formally report the atrocities.
And what happened?
Tragically, nothing. Nothing came of it at that time. His warnings were effectively silenced by institutional inaction.
The resistance sometimes required outright defiance. You see this in the case of Sergeant Gerald Bruner.
Bruner's story is a profound example of courage. He openly defied his team leader, Doyle's, order to execute a farmer who refused to give information.
In front of his family.
Disgusted by the execution of the farmer in front of his wife and children, Brunner stayed up that entire night guarding the surviving family members until they could be evacuated by helicopter the next morning.
And his reward for that moral integrity.
He was immediately branded a coward by Doyle and Hawkins and was transferred out of the unit.
Barry Bowman also refused an unlawful order.
Yes, Bowman, a new medic, refused Trout's order to shoot a wounded man, and Trout explicitly framed it as a brutal initiation. Break your cherry, Doc.
So these actions by Wood, Sanchez, Brunner, Bowman, they show that despite the atmosphere, moral resistance existed.
It existed, but the system actively fought to suppress it. They reported incidents to chaplains and officers, but they were generally told the incidents were isolated or that they should just ignore them.
Let's talk about the long-term psychological damage to these men.
Damage that we now recognize as severe post-traumatic stress disorder years before it was officially identified.
The psychological cost was just catastrophic.
It was. Even Sam Ybarra, despite being the most volatile perpetrator, was himself deeply wounded. The book documents his rapid decline after his dishonorable discharge in 1969.
How so?
He became abusive, volatile, consumed by alcohol and drugs. His body deteriorated from 200 pounds to 145. His wife recalled him waking up sweating, terrified, convinced he was still under attack in Vietnam.
Yeah, he was plagued by guilt.
Yes, over-convincing his friend, Ken Green, to join the unit. He would obsessively repeat, "It's my fault, he shouldn't have died." His violence was intertwined with his own trauma.
And Terrence Kerrigan, who witnessed the beheading, he suffered specific crippling trauma.
Kerrigan's life was shattered. He dropped out of college, became addicted to painkillers, walked with a permanent limp. He was physically and emotionally fractured.
And there was a specific trigger for him.
His mother testified that he would recoil and turn away every single time he heard a baby cry. A clear, specific trigger tied directly to the atrocity he witnessed. He felt he had sunk into a level of anger and brutality that made him feel ugly and completely alone.
And even the soldiers who later cooperated with the investigation, like Harold Fisher and Douglas Teeters, they paid a heavy price long after the war.
A heavy professional and personal price. Fisher suffered from severe depression and drug dependency, recalling, "I had to dull the pain of the memories."
And Teeters lost his job.
Yeah, Teeters, who was already strung out in the field, lost his livelihood. CID agents showed up at his workplace, which scared his security-minded supervisor, and he lost his job. He explicitly said his life spiraled down after that.
So the trauma just followed them.
Immense. They tried to bury it, but the flashbacks and nightmares always returned. It illustrates that the tragedy extended far beyond the battlefield to ruin the lives of the soldiers involved.
This tragic reality leads us into the cover-up, the years-long Criminal Investigation Division effort, and then the eventual rediscovery by reporters.
Right. Years passed. It wasn't until 1971 that any formal military action was taken.
And the investigation was known internally as the Coy allegation.
After former Tiger Ryan Causey's initial complaint, yes. It finally began in 1971, almost 4 years after the atrocities took place, and was led by a diligent and tenacious CID agent named Gus Apsey.
For listeners who might not be familiar, CID is the U.S. Army's Criminal Investigation Division. They're the federal law enforcement agency for the Army.
Which gave Apsey the necessary authority, but he immediately faced immense challenges.
The challenges were staggering. The unit had effectively become a ghost platoon.
Well, first, the Army's own unit history records only listed the standard companies A, B, and C. There was nothing documented about Tiger Force, so tracing personnel records and confirming unit deployment was extremely difficult from the start.
And the witnesses themselves.
They were scattered across the country, highly reluctant to cooperate with the very institution that had failed to protect them.
Right. They were fearful or just wanted to forget.
They often used the phrase, "I don't remember." Plus, key suspects were difficult to locate. Sam Ybarra was either unreachable or intoxicated during attempts to interview him.
And the commanders were denying everything.
Actively. Morse, Hawkins, they denied any knowledge of war crimes. Apsey was essentially trying to reconstruct a complex series of crimes from a distant jungle, with institutional denial actively working against him.
But despite those obstacles, Agent Apsey pressed on for 4.5 years.
Painstakingly accumulating overwhelming evidence.
So what were the key confessions that allowed him to break the case open?
The most significant breakthrough came from James Barnett, who confessed to the murder of the young mother.
In a 1974 interview.
He was under immense psychological stress, even clutching a shotgun during the questioning. He broke down, confirmed the unit was told to kill everything that moves, and he provided sworn testimony detailing the murder under Trout's direct order.
And that confession was crucial.
It provided a clear link between orders and execution.
The corroboration that these illegal orders came from the top was also essential for establishing institutional responsibility.
And this is where Dr. Bradford Muchler, the former battalion surgeon, played a vital role.
He attended the mission briefings.
Right. He provided key testimony, confirming that in those briefings, the order to kill everything that moved was given routinely. He stated he understood this order to mean, kill whatever was in the area. If it moves, kill it.
So that provided direct evidence that the mentality was fostered by command.
It validated the soldiers' claims about the ghostwriter kill quota.
So APSI's final report, delivered after 4.5 years of intensive work, was staggering.
It was decisive. The report identified 20 substantiated war crimes corroborated by multiple sources, sworn statements, records of location, medical testimony.
So this wasn't just a few isolated incidents.
This was systematic criminality by a specific unit over many months.
Yet despite this overwhelming body of evidence that implicated multiple soldiers and commanders still serving, no military hearings or charges were ever brought. Why? Why did prosecution fail?
And this is the core tragedy of the book's narrative, the failure of the military justice system. Several factors converged.
Like what?
Key perpetrators like Ibarra were already out of the army, dishonorably discharged. Crucially, the statute of limitations was approaching for certain charges.
And there was political resistance.
Massive political resistance within the higher echelons of the CID and the high command to pursue the case.
The book quotes Henry Tufts, who oversaw the CID at the time.
And he provides this incredible internal perspective on the gravity of the institutional failure. Tufts was profoundly disturbed by the findings.
What did he say?
He recognized that the Army had created what he called a Frankenstein and had intentionally turned it loose. He believed the crimes were so serious they rivaled the scope and brutality of the My Lai massacre. He argued that the evidence demanded prosecution.
But the institutional desire to avoid another scandal was stronger than the commitment to justice.
Precisely. Tufts was soon ousted from his post, and the institutional tide decisively turned toward burying the case.
The judgment was that the political costs were too high.
Yeah, a massive publicized war crimes trial, especially as the nation was consumed by Watergate and the desire to just move past the trauma of the Vietnam conflict. It was too much.
So the 700-page CID file, despite all the trauma and confession it contained, was just
quietly sealed and filed away in the archives.
So the meticulous work of Agent APSI, which cost years of his life and his professional integrity, was just negated by political expediency.
And the full extent of the atrocities remained officially unacknowledged for decades.
Until years later, when reporters Michael Sallah and Mitch Weiss rediscovered the archive.
They meticulously went through that 700-page CID file, which confirmed the full documented extent of the atrocities, the sworn statements, and the subsequent failure of the military justice system to act on the truth.
And their exposure brought that long-buried evidence forward, finally giving the facts a public platform. It's telling that even after the evidence was made public, some former Tigers remained defiant.
Indeed. William Doyle, for example, remained defiant when interviewed by the reporters. He insisted that the Tigers did any goddamn thing you felt like doing to survive, and that they fought the war the way they needed to fight it.
Which just highlights the lasting moral distortion created by the orders and the environment they operated in.
The reporters' persistence ensured that the institutional failure, the cover-up, was finally documented, bringing this hidden chapter of history into the light, grounded entirely in the Army's own investigative documents.
So what does this Pulitzer-winning investigative work ultimately communicate to us? What are the themes?
I think the book serves as a devastating factual document confirming several overarching themes rooted in military conduct and consequence.
First and foremost, the profound failure of leadership.
At multiple levels, you had the immediate, dangerous incompetence of Lieutenant Hawkins in the field, combined with the catastrophic fixation on body count driven by Battalion Commander Lieutenant Colonel Morse.
And it paints this picture of the total moral collapse of a specialized unit.
Exacerbated by that lethal mix of extreme psychological strain, relentless guerrilla warfare, fatigue, and heavy drug use.
And the design of the unit itself, that elite autonomy paired with aggressive recruitment, meant that when discipline failed,
the result was systematic atrocity.
Critically, the book documents the enduring psychological cost.
confirming that the tragedy extended far beyond the immediate Vietnamese victims to the soldiers themselves. These men suffered from crippling, undiagnosed PTSD. They lived with profound guilt, nightmares, addictions, and ruined lives for decades because the system that created them then abandoned them.
The book itself stands as a testament to investigative persistence.
Absolutely. It demonstrates how long-buried Army evidence, the sworn statements, the detailed CID reports, was eventually uncovered, ensuring this difficult historical chapter was documented by journalists when the military failed to prosecute itself.
The entire investigation and its ultimate publication was critical.
It was critical in proving that these actions were not random acts carried out in the fog of war, but were systematic, premeditated murders carried out by a unit on a brutal rampage fully known to some commanders.
The historical importance of this documentation is just immense. It offers a clear-eyed look at accountability failure. The final, provocative thought that the book leaves us with is this. How many other deeply uncomfortable, documented historical chapters remain sealed, waiting for investigative tenacity to bring them into the light?
The truth often exists, tucked away in an archive, requiring only the will to find it.
That was Tiger Force, a true story of men in war summarized so you don't have to read it.